All right, welcome to the latest edition of the FPL America podcast. This is David Smith.
Travis Hoig.
Brian Shesko.
Gentlemen, unfortunately for us, although maybe fortunately for us, a season has ended. It's always a interesting time, sad time, fun time for recollection after the season ends. And sometimes it's rejoicing if you won your mini league, if maybe you had a career high finish in overall rank, that can be celebrated. There's always something to be celebrated. I wanted to be celebrating Arsenal Football Club being Premier League champions, and unfortunately, that did not happen. But we're gonna have a little season summary here. Look, obviously, we're not planning for any fantasy weeks next week, but for those people who are wild enough to actually choose to listen to us, as Brian would always say, how there's anyone that actually do that is beyond us, but there are people who do. So that's fantastic, and we appreciate it. All that being said, we're going to dive on multiple things, cover our own experiences and what happened, and then also kind of just go over what we want to try to take from this season and then catapult that into next season, maybe things we did right, things we did wrong, things we want to change, those types of things. Brian, what do you think?
I think that's great. I have some questions for you guys, kind of some season-ending thoughts, and just some we can talk about what happened in podcast league, mini league. Yeah, I think it's a good way to wrap up. This shouldn't take very long.
No, shouldn't.
I do have
we say that every week.
I have an hour's worth of stats that we can go through, and I have a lot of things to talk about Tottenham.
Okay, great.
No, we have. Yeah, let's just get into it.
Travis, where do you want to start? I was thinking number one, at least say
start at the beginning.
Congratulations.
I think we should start with
wear your Manchester City outfit. That's awesome.
It's one of my favorite shirts, and I saw it, and I'm like, you know what? Screw it. City won the title. This is me wearing City baby blue today, and it's painful. But look, I knew going into the final match week, there was maybe a 10 to 15% chance that Arsenal might be able to get a result.
Yeah, it's a little generous.
So you're saying there's a chance, right? I mean, there was a chance. Arsenal had to have West Ham show up. When I saw Bowen wasn't playing, I'm like, oh, that sucks. That was not good.
Yeah, it didn't happen.
And then as the match unfolded, well, Foden scores in like the 3rd minute, and then he scores in like the 8th minute. And so it's like, okay, well, now it's done. Then West Ham draws one back right about the time that Arsenal, well, that's not true. Arsenal go down to Everton, and then right about the same time, Arsenal end up scoring and West Ham score. And for another about 10, 15 minutes, Travis, I had some hope.
Honestly, there was a point at which I was really excited because it looked like City was going to draw potentially, and Arsenal was either going to lose or draw.
That would have been brutal.
Yeah.
I just wanted to see the carnage at that point.
I get it. If I'm you as a Liverpool fan,
whatever,
finishing 3rd and losing your manager and all the things, that's tough. Hey, but like Brian said before the pod, you guys won the Carling Cup, the Carabao Cup. What is it now? The
Monster.com.
Monster.com.
Whatever.
Cup. But hey, it's a trophy.
They let Klopp take that with him, I heard.
Is that
true? It's in the back of his car.
Yeah,
I think he puts it in the back of his car.
I'm not sure that's technically true. They gave him like little baby trophies in a presentation.
No, look, Liverpool finished 3rd with all the crazy turnover or injuries that they had, and the midfield turnover and all the things. They did amazing, and it wasn't until the last 4 match weeks that things seemed to fall apart.
Wheels definitely fell off.
Maybe it was building up to that point, but they were still holding on, and then the last 4 match weeks it fell apart. Unfortunately, that I guess kind of happens sometimes. For Arsenal fans, we blew it at Christmas. The back-to-back losses to West Ham and Fulham around Christmas blew it. Right before Christmas. And then in the new year, obviously they were great. The loss to Villa, but I mean, look, Villa was a chandler, and now can say they're a Champions League club. Like, Villa was tough all year. So
yeah, that's where they belong.
And they did really good against the top teams. The top 5-6 teams Villa was really good against. So, at the time when you lose to them, it's like, that's not a great loss. But at the end of the season, you look and you're like, maybe it wasn't that bad. So I don't know. City,
I'm curious to see what everybody does with Manchester City. I feel like for FPL next season, that's like my number one. I mean, it's everyone's number one question. I think is what pricing ends up changing, and so right away you're just like, well, the top teams, like.
Well, Brian, you and I talked about this yesterday, and I think we had a pretty decent discussion. I want to bring back some of that discussion about next season. And maybe we don't have to talk as long as we did about it, but I just want to bring it up a little bit about FPL pricing, and I want to just give our opinions because I thought they were decent when we were discussing it.
I would ask the question this way. Which would you prefer for next season? Another season like this one with so many accessible good options, or maybe more like it was before, where pricing that makes it essential for you to balance top teams with mid to lower tier players.
So this is Travis, I'll go first.
Because this year, I think very clearly you had one or like two super premiums, and then kind of everybody else.
Yeah.
So there was no price challenging, which that would lead into another question I have about.
There's a little bit of a middle ground value. With like Son
changed it a little bit. Saka, once his price got up there, changed things a little bit. But
you're right.
Money was never an issue.
I was going to say
ever this season.
I agree. Like you always had options this year.
Yeah. So because I was going to say it just.
Hold on, I want to answer. When do you want me to answer that question?
Yeah, go ahead and answer the first question.
Forgot to ask you a question.
No, go ahead.
No,
answer the question.
Remember. He forgot to
answer it already.
I'm going to answer. So it's funny for me to answer this question, and this is why. I went back and checked my ranks over the past 9-10 years.
Yeah.
This is my highest overall rank finish.
Uh-huh.
And I was 7 to 8 points away from finishing in the top 100,000.
So you want prices to be the exact same?
I don't necessarily. So what's interesting is this season, you and I discussed this, and we'll dive more into this. It felt like most of the season, because of the prices of players, you could pretty much just pick guys from the top 6 clubs.
Yeah.
Like whatever teams are doing the best in the top 6, pretty much you could just pick guys from those teams. And oftentimes it was 3 Liverpool players, 3 Arsenal players, 3 City players, 2 Spurs, 2 Chelsea players, and 2 Newcastle. And now that's your full squad, pretty much, except for maybe your goalkeepers.
Right.
But because the prices where they were, Gordon. I said Aaron Gordon.
Yeah, you got Denver. You got the Nuggets on the mind.
Yeah. What's his name? Anthony Gordon. Guys like Anthony Gordon or Havertz, or you just start bouncing around. Obviously Palmer.
Yeah.
Even Nico Jackson. I mean, a lot of
at
times.
The very end,
Arsenal defenders.
Yeah.
So you just, all those things, you start bouncing it around, and you're like, all these guys scoring really good fantasy points, finishing in the top 5 in their positions.
Yeah.
Overall in fantasy, we're all in the top 6 clubs, but they were all money available. So long answer here. All that to say, in the past, when it necessarily hasn't been like that, I didn't have as good a finish. So I did feel like before, for podcasting sake and for interest, I liked it better when you couldn't just go get players from all of the top clubs. Yeah. Like, it made, for fantasy reasons, it makes the deep dive into, I think, Travis, the deep dive into analytics not as important when you can just go chalk across the top.
Yeah. Well, this segment titled "Money, Will It Ever Matter Again?" and brought to you by Weller 107. By the way.
Oh yeah.
Well, you actually specifically lamented on many game weeks how the template team was stressing you out because. It was just you go to that, you get your pat score, you call it a day, and we move on. And how you constantly were trying to break the template.
Yeah,
which obviously worked for you, but
sometimes it did work. And I would.
Well, it didn't work till late, and then
I was going to say.
But I guess that's what I'm trying to get at is ultimately, if you can afford anybody, how the hell was there still a template?
Right.
Right?
I was because I would
because
just say,
it was just guys from the top 6 clubs.
Well,
I mean, it was, you could say template meaning you might have 7 or 8 of the same starters as a top 10K.
Yeah, but it just seemed like there was like everyone's teams were more than 7 or 8. It was like 9 or 10 guys were all the same.
Well,
for a good chunk of the season.
there was never a point. Did you have a point anytime this season where you were priced out of a move or moves that you wanted to make?
maybe once, but
Yeah,
not that I can recall.
maybe once.
You were never
It
more.
always had to do with like a Holland or Salah.
Right. It was only
Salah was
if-
never that relevant.
And I was going to say the guy that really blew this up
Was
Trent Alexander-Arnold. Trent ruined this because if Trent mattered, if Trent had not
Wasn't
gotten injured,
Yeah,
he was gaining
you're probably
steam.
right.
Then he gets injured for a long time.
yeah.
If you were debating whether or not to have, or then if you had him to keep an $8.5 million defender,
Right.
I'd argue Trippier is in the same boat because he was also
everything. And
injured, but also very
yes.
high.
Right. And so when Trippier got injured, that also took a huge a chunk of pressure off, and
And-
his was less than Trent's.
Yeah,
Then Salah was dinged up and or was gone for match week.
Perhaps gone.
There was just never, you were always, and then because Arsenal crushed so hard, when they went on their run, it really was like, did you get Saka? And then their defense is clean sheets week on week. Did you have a defender? That was it. If you jumped on that early and stayed on it, you could have avoided, I avoided Cole Palmer for, until what?
Too
Like game
long.
week 18 or something like that.
Same.
So I waited forever to get
You
the
waited
top.
that long to get
Oh,
Palmer?
I'm sure of
Yeah.
it.
I know, I
I
did
am
too.
certain I did not have Cole Palmer until way, way, way late in
Way
the
too
season.
late.
And
I
he
agree
didn't
with
start completely on fire.
No,
He
but,
was- he
but
was
he
still
was
good
no,
enough.
he was very good.
He was-
I think
he
it
was-
was just whether you believed.
I had
in
him
it
in
or not.
match week 10. I think that's the first time
That's
I had
crazy
him.
Right.
good.
That's so early. I'm just saying, like he changed stuff for everybody. I think I had Cole
man.
Palmer in game week 18. That's the first time I
I
had
waited
him.
a lot longer than that.
So there was a point where either way with Cole Palmer, it was like you just can't ignore it anymore.
Right.
But I think there was a point in the season where that was true for Ollie Watkins, and I waited way too long on Ollie Watkins. And we were talking about this ahead of time. If anybody who wants to do it, there are many tools out there that you can use to look at your
Tell
ranks for the
everyone
season.
about
But
this. This is unreal.
LiveFPL.net was, I've seen it. Several people shared that, like just content creators or whatever have shared LiveFPL.net. You can enter in
Very good.
your team ID number, and it will give you a spreadsheet of of your week-
individual match
Yeah,
weeks.
individual match weeks, your weekly history, where you ranked, how kind of a snapshot of your season, who hurt you the most, who helped you the most, that kind of thing, player on player, and your history from kind of throughout.
It's absolutely fascinating.
Extremely good. But no, I think for the money, like my guess is I don't feel like we spent a ton of time, like what was your final team value? How many times did we talk about that? 0.
Yeah.
105.8 was my finishing team value.
I think mine
Who
was
cares?
105.3. It didn't matter
Right,
this year.
so what?
In past years, it did
Right.
matter. I remember when we
You
came,
used to be really
when
big
this
into that.
when this pod came up with the
Right.
actual ATV, the actual team value, because it's
Yeah.
the actual money you have. That the team value it shows is not the actual money.
Right. What you have actually to spend.
What
in
you
real-
actually have the access to spend because of the points gained. You're only getting a half a pound.
I guess what I'm saying is, like, just because money didn't matter this year or maybe even last year or 2 years ago doesn't mean that it won't matter next season. So I almost am expecting that we'll be talking more about team value, or that
Next year,
transfers might.
because they're gonna do a better job pricing.
So
I would suggest they
so that's the
won't.
second thing. Everyone seems to agree the game needs to change, but no one seems to have a consistent opinion about exactly how they can do that.
Can I say my big change needs to happen?
I'm saying that they did FPL Challenge late in
Yeah.
the season as a way of offering some kind of alternative, I guess, to shake things up. Some people, I think, I saw several prominent FPL Twitter accounts at least who liked some of the ideas, like Game Week 38. The idea of Game Week 38, you can only choose one player per team. You can only have one player from each team. Would anyone want that rule instituted in FPL regular? I don't think so.
Probably not.
I would be okay with a limit on 2 players per team.
Right. And if they did that, I think if they knock that back a little bit, or like Dave, I know you got one of your ideas. I think I can't imagine it being a bother to people. Go ahead, say it.
Vice captain gets not double points, but you get, I guess, a half a point. In other words, like it
1.5.
1.5. It can't be double because that's what the captain is. But make it so that if there's a constant set, 80% of people are captaining Holland, give people an option to get a little bit more points and make the vice captain work something. Because maybe once a season your vice captain is actually plays maybe once.
Oh, get plays as your captain.
Correct.
It's so rare that your captain blanks.
Yeah.
Or doesn't not
or
blanks,
doesn't
captain
play.
doesn't play.
Doesn't play. So why not do something like that's not that crazy? Just give the vice captain some form of value or worth, or come up with a different title than vice captain. And every week you can allot one person to get 1.5 points.
I think we can all. I think it's pretty certain the number one thing they could change is to do kind of what they did with FPL Challenge here, where you could make changes to the team.
That
up
was
to
the
deadline.
big thing. Yeah.
So
yes.
So you could change.
They're not going to. They'll never
until the game
time.
started. Yeah.
And
until
it's
the
just
game
like
started.
the NFL.
Correct.
This is
you can't change somebody who's already played, but you can change somebody who has not yet played.
correct.
Right.
Me, Brian, and Scott, we've been clamoring this since probably we started years ago.
I just feel like it's not like
changes the game significantly.
It's not like fantasy sports is an England only product and there aren't any other options of product out there anywhere. Honestly, it's like, can you look at one fantasy football league in the United States and see how that's run? I said there are 10 million people, less than 11 million total teams according to FPL this season. There's like 20 million people that play Yahoo Fantasy Sports in fantasy football in the United States.
And that's not the biggest.
And Yahoo, exactly. Yahoo's not the biggest one. So that's what I'm saying. Like, why can one type of league, one type of fantasy sport figure it out, and another one not only didn't move their deadline closer, they moved it further back. Right. I think we feel pretty certain they will never have an injury protocol,
right? The
way, not to drag NFL football back into this again.
Well, they do it really well. So
right, the NFL does it amazingly. Where they're very clear, consistent labeling from Wednesday on. It's updated daily through Saturday, and then you have a final run through on Sunday morning, and well in advance of the games and walkthroughs and warm-ups whether or not someone has a tight hamstring or not. Like, the detail of it is it is precise because it is a huge business. That's probably the problem here, is that it's just not, the business of it is
no
business is there
for the Premier League, yes. For the fantasy sport of it, no. And I think
fair.
But it's growing. Let's not forget, it wasn't that long ago.
There's growth. It's just not. I just don't think it's there yet. Although this was the first year, there were. I would say I know for sure it was FPL Raptor, and I would imagine I would love Ben Dinnery. I imagine would say the same thing. Well, he doesn't need more publicity. He's got 50,000 followers or whatever.
Followers, yeah.
Just the frustration of, because I know Eddie Howe drove people crazy this year for what felt like flat out lies. They also had the most
past him,
but they also had massive injuries constantly. So on one hand, I'm not sure what good the lies do you when your team is so decimated by injury. It's like does it really matter if it's Lewis Hall that ends up stepping out there? Like, I don't really know what that does for you. Either way, this was one of the first years where it was like, I think people were genuinely frustrated by the lack of transparency, something beyond gamesmanship. Like, it was something beyond, I just don't want my opponent to have, I need that competitive edge. We are not going to give anything away. Where this time it was like, no, come on, like, you are just flat out lying about this, and it actually is it's actually a problem. So I don't know.
I just think it's somehow related to how can they keep screwing up VAR? How can they continue to screw up this and that and this?
There's no way that gets voted out, right?
No,
there's no way, right?
I don't think so. I don't want it as many problems. I just think, Travis, you said it. You just got to use it right. How tough is it to just use it right, and then change certain rules? Why does it have to be? You can't look at it for a red card if a yellow card isn't flagged first, right? In other words, like broaden it so that the referee in the booth. I'm not saying we need to go to video refereeing.
Honestly, I don't even trust the people that are doing it know how to use it. With the farcical stuff that's come through,
it's the same stuff that annoys me, Brian. It just seems like
makes sense.
Like the whole FPL, like how long it takes to update scores. Like, I've been joking for years, and
it's gotten pretty good actually.
A lot of our
was great.
No,
most of the scores were pretty well up to date.
But like,
so after the match,
your team, like your score might be updated on your page, but then when you go to like the league page, like the totals aren't on there, and then you got to wait till like 8 hours.
Significantly better than last year.
Why can't it be automatic? Is there not a computer that can run it?
Gen
I've been joking about this for years, that they got a 286 still running their one little computer running all this stuff.
Tandy. They got the Tandy
it's
going.
It's insanity.
This is
how sucky slow it is.
Yeah. This is a guy, Dave stands at his microwave and says, come on, hurry. What is taking so long?
Just waiting to hit the button. Look, I'm serious though. This is not that hard.
The burrito's not going to cook itself.
Yeah.
Why can't they give it like?
I don't know, man.
It's just crazy.
There are game aspects that that's what I'm saying. I don't imagine they're going to do anything about it.
It's just amazing at like what I feel like is how popular this is worldwide. This isn't just an England thing.
Yeah, but what else in the actual game? Like, what else in the scoring of this would do anything to enhance this? Do they need to get, like, everybody talked about various like variations of the game that just never quite took off, and it was like, hey, the midfielder who he might only get 2 points in real life, but he completed 90 passes and was 89% accurate, so that's worth 0.5.
So
and you get into fractional scoring for
that what the bonus point system is
data.
trying to do, though?
I think that's what it's trying to do. Yes.
So I think, Brian, for me, there's a reason why I don't do NBA fantasy or baseball fantasy.
Yeah.
Because it's boring.
It's too much. It's too many things I have to look at.
Yeah.
With NFL, it's cut and this is not an NFL podcast, but it's cut and dry. It's simple. You can see the production. You can see the numbers.
The scoring is complicated, but somehow it doesn't seem as complicated whenever you get into the NBA, where it's like field goal percentage, free throw percentage.
Right.
3 points, 2 points,
right?
Blocks, rebounds, assists. I don't know. It's not that far.
It just adds. Look, no, Brian, it's not. So receivers have touchdowns and yardage. Same,
and catches.
And then running backs the same. You're not even using defensive stats. No one's ever complained about that. Yes, there's some leagues that have like one defensive player. Those are dumb, but whatever. Like, it happens. It's fine.
Why are we not just doing fantasy horse racing?
Yeah, it's true.
One thing. They just run in a circle.
I don't know about horses, but I'm sure someone out there is doing it and they're really good. All that being said,
that's
Brian, my opinion on that is that for some reason it just feels too much. I think the way they do it right now is pretty good.
Yeah, is it good enough? I guess is the question.
If it wasn't good enough, then people wouldn't play it.
Some people still would.
Yeah.
but it does grow. I mean, I remember.
I guess because that was.
I feel like the overall number, Brian, of people playing fantasy has doubled since we started recording this pod.
It's been a lot. I feel like this is where a former podcast host of this podcast
never heard of him
would have talked about. I think
Travis, we lost Brian.
I don't know.
Another spider.
No, what I was going to say is
calling you right now.
No, definitely not. What I was going to say is I think something that he would have
happened. Where'd you go, Brian?
I don't know. It's fine. And now I can't remember what I was going to say, so let's move on.
Something about Scott said.
It's fine. Brian.
Okay.
He
would have said a former. Are we still recording? Are we still?
Yeah.
Good?
Oh yeah, we're still going.
All right. We just can't see Brian.
We just
All
don't know what happened to
Brian.
Brian.
Our voices. This is old school podcast right here. So
what were we talking about right before that?
It was about the
Scott
changes in the league
blah, blah,
not making changes.
Oh, what I was going to say for him is complaints about the way of how slow the league is to implement changes that matter. The Premier League at large, the FA, is slow to implement changes that are meaningful to help not just for the game, for the speed of the game, or or the accuracy of the game, but even just things that are sensible changes, which sensible is carrying a lot of weight there. And he would always, he compared it to baseball. It was one of the last things he did on this podcast was to say even Major League Baseball here in the United States changed things so drastically in the last year where now pitchers are on a pitch clock. Like, that's a massive change to the rules that change the way the game is played, that change the way it changes everything about how everyone watches. It changes the overall length of the game, whatever. But I just wonder, everyone seems so hesitant. There's something, it's like it's treated as sacred, like the way the rules are, the way things are. And I'm like, it's so weird to think that may extend somehow into a fantasy game.
But it feels like it.
But if there's ever been a time, I'm saying that the fantasy challenge is the first, adding the draft to the game, several years ago. Like, they are giving options. So I'm optimistic that hopefully this coming season that there's something, because they kept teasing changes too, where it's like, oh man, is it to the actual game? Oh no, they just created a new side game.
Yeah.
And it's like maybe this is the year that they finally do something, and it's like, well, I don't know if they're gonna do it.
It'll never happen.
Okay.
All right. Travis, how did you feel like you did this year?
Terribly.
But
1.5 million.
Okay. So you finished higher in years prior?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the worst season I've ever had.
Okay. What do you feel like you did differently, or what if you could go back and change anything? And I know I'm not giving you very long to think.
No,
about
that's fine.
this. If you could go back and change anything, like what got you to your worst season? And look, this happens. This happened to. Is it Praz? Had either Praz or Late Riser had one of their worst.
Late Riser had a bad season this season. Yeah.
By his standards, right? So it happens to really, really smart pundits and people who have a tendency of finishing in the top 5,000, and so don't get hung up on that. I know you're not.
I'm not hung up on it.
But
I know what happened. I know exactly what happened. The title of my team is giving up by week 8.
Okay.
In the middle of the season, I paid a whole lot less attention than I did at the beginning, and a whole lot less attention than I did at the end. So I bookended actual good effort with life got busy and I stopped caring that much. I knew I had to show up and at least know what I was talking about, but I didn't actually have to do a good job.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just made safe decisions during the middle chunk of the season.
Okay.
It was really what it came down to. And that ended up benefiting me at the end because then I had all my chips stored up, right? And so I made a pretty decent surge at the end of the season. And I played really well the last probably
4 or 5 weeks. Okay.
7 weeks, really. I think I actually tried to catch Elliott.
Right.
I didn't, but I actually tried. At least I beat Matt. That's all that mattered.
Sure.
And that's really what it comes down to. Staying motivated is really difficult.
Okay.
It's a long season.
It is a long season. And Brian and I were talking about this the other day that it seems like there's a lot of pundits and people who have paid attention to this game, and for whatever reason it kind of drags on. And this might be another thing they could do. I was just thinking about, as you were talking about it, Travis, it is a wicked long season. I'm like, well, what could we do to make it, to spice it up? Like, you technically could have a first half winner, a second half winner, and then an overall winner in leagues if the FPL set it up like that. In other words, like,
yeah.
So then it literally, if you only wanted to play half the season and you're like, hey, I won the first half, I'm done. And then you just want to shut it down. Like, that's possible. And so I just wonder, if there's not things like, Brian, you were saying, what could you do? What could you actually do to change things? I think you could make the vice captain worth something.
Yeah.
And then I would also say, if you could, you could even do something as like, if your vice captain scores higher than the average player, then you get like 4 extra bonus points or something like that. In other words, like, give it some form of a value so that you're actually placing value.
Did somebody? I feel like I saw it somewhere of like if you pick your optimal team of the players you have, you know what I mean? Like, if you avoid huge bench points or whatever, like if you choose the players, like you have 15 players,
oh man,
and you choose the actual highest scoring 11 that you actually own, that there's something to that. I'm like, okay. I guess that's mostly fine. You could, in a way, you could get around that just by having dead players.
But then there's always
your
a
entire
risk
bench, right?
That comes with that,
right? So, yeah, it would be minimal risk, but either way, like that was an idea. I remember somebody floating that out there somewhere, but no, as far as like personal strategy, like I think everyone would agree that paying attention is fairly important. And at the very least, it's the start of a good
Let's just
score.
calm down, okay?
I'm just saying.
That is so fantastic. Brian, what's something that
No, you go next. Because we'll wrap up the leagues, kind of how the leagues went.
I kind of alluded to this earlier in the season.
I'll intro Dave by saying this was by far the best season that Dave Smith has had playing FPL, as far as the mini league and as far as our podcast league is concerned.
True.
This is his single greatest accomplishment in his life. It's true. This tops anything else he's done in every way.
Hey, I beat League Diane, former champ League Diane.
Yeah.
I beat her at the end of the season. Now, she came on late, but I still ended up beating her by fast math here, 34 points. So I will take that.
Yeah.
I will take that because she is a tough cookie, as they say.
Yeah. Excellent.
Well, no, thank you. Yes, I was looking back at my prior finishes, and yes, this is by far and away my highest finish. And maybe it was because I know a difference one thing that was changed from last season to this season was last season I got smoked not captaining Holland every single week.
Yeah.
There was multiple times where like Salah had a good matchup. I picked Salah, Holland would get a hat trick. So I got hammered, and I could never, ever, ever make those points up. It was like after like 2 or 3 different match weeks, I was behind 60 points, and I could never make those points up. So my goal this year was just to pretty much captain Holland every single time. I think on live.net, it said that I captained Holland 19 times.
Okay.
So, that's interesting. I honestly would have thought it would have been more than that.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Still though. With that weird dip in form, the injuries that he had, that's still a lot.
I guess. But I captained Holland 19 times, Salah 9. That seemed high to me. I don't remember him being in my team that much.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Palmer 4, Foden 2, Watkins 1, Solanke 1, that had to be match week 29 was Solanke. Son once and Saka once. So, but yeah, Holland's a standout 19 times. And again, I would have thought it would have been more than that, but it wasn't. And but so I think that I changed that. And then the other thing I did this season, instead of saving my chips all for the end of the season, in the second half, it was play them when it felt right. And I can look back. My first wild card was match week 3. That's a normal thing for me. It's usually in match week 2, 3, 4 is usually when I'll use my first wild card, because it's unbelievable. No matter how much you think you know, after the first couple match weeks, it feels like you know nothing. Yeah. It's like, did you get Brian Mbuemo, Brian, to start the season? Right? Like all the.
I did not.
Yeah. Did you have a Udogie in your team early season?
Yeah.
You're right. So, and then my second wild card was pretty much on the nose. Actually, that's not true. The first time you get a wild card is match week 20 for the second wild card. But match week 21, I wild carded, and not many people had wild carded right then. And that wild card really, I went from after that, I was in 590th place, and three match weeks after that, I was at 183. So it was it was kind of a steep rise there. But when you look at my overall rank for the season, it's just kind of a steady climb almost the entire way, which I thought was pretty interesting. Brian has a completely different. His looks like trading stocks. It's skyrocket up, skyrocket way down, skyrocket way up again, right?
Risk versus reward, right?
A little bit, yeah.
I used my triple captain, I think, when a lot of people did on the Erling Haaland double match week in like 25, I think. And then free hit. My team was set up. I had a free hit in 29, then I bench boosted late. But I don't know. I know I wild carded when not many people were wild carding, and I think I was able to get a little advantage there. But I don't know. In seasons past, I always held on my chips. And this season, it was just, no, let's just use it and just push. I remember I said this before, push trouble down the road, just use it later.
Yeah. I've seen way more people even at the kind of the end of this season. Just one of the big changes that's available out there to see. It's something that's been talked about a little bit. It was just that because the FA Cup will eliminate replays, it will essentially eliminate any huge double game weeks and blanks next season.
Yeah. I didn't know that. Did that change happen?
So that change that's been announced. Yeah, that's nailed down. So there will still be, small blanks, but nothing like game week 29 this season where 6 teams are playing. Yeah, that will not happen.
It was
again.
A joke,
right? And there won't be any double game weeks where you have 6 teams doubling. So that will definitely change how and when you use chips. And I would say for sure, like people already have been advocating for years to use your bench boost week 1, where bench boost week 1, where the most going into a single game week. You have at least a decent feel for what the matchups are going to look like. I think a lot more people are going to do that this season than in previous seasons. At least it'll change the way, like, you won't have to wait for some big double week to use a chip like bench boost that I think everybody's kind of bothered with. Oh, that's a change that I remember people talking about. Comparative to like Champions League, Fantasy Champions League, Fantasy World Cup did it too, where you had it was something like an all-out attack that they had years ago in FPL.
Oh, yeah.
Where you could play all of your attacking players. Like you could kind of play all your forward players with this, where it was you could choose, you could make your team unlimited for anyone. Like you could pick any players. So if you wanted to put 11 Manchester City players in, you could do that.
Oh, wow.
Or where you could play where it really was.
And money wouldn't matter.
Yeah, and you could do all. Well, it would matter to your the amount of money you had. But
okay, so you couldn't overspend your bank.
right. You couldn't overspend your bank,
but you could have as many players from a team as you wanted.
Yeah, you weren't limited by only 3 from a particular team.
Okay, I would be.
So
okay
that was
with,
an
I would be
that
okay
was an
with
option.
that.
Either way, that's back there. The point is, like, yeah, I just think chip strategy, playing it when it feels right, or at least when the matchups look better. I think more people have to do that this coming season. The only thing that would change, I mean, obviously, like, you assume that the top teams are going to make, you'll see how the Carabao Cup progresses. You'll see how the FA Cup progresses. You'll know whether it's going to be, a Manchester City again going to the cup, whatever cup final. So if going ahead of time, like if it's going to be City doing it, and that there's a week where City is going to be a doubling team, yeah, of course it's going to change the way you strategize. It does every season. So what you won't have anymore is a week like, where it's like, oh, Brighton is one of your doubling teams. Won't ever happen again. Like, you will never have to choose from that kind of, like, it's never going to be like, oh, scraping the bottom of the barrel because, they got blanked out of a game week because their actually good opponent is in some other cup match.
Yeah, no, I get it. Things I probably learned the most. I don't know. I feel like I took less hits this year than in past, but I wasn't anti-hit. I think I end up having a minus 60 points on hits there. Fast math, 60 divided by 4 is, I don't know, there's a 15 there probably.
Yeah, 4 times 15
so
is 60. Yeah.
15 hits
Got it.
over the season. And I think that's low for me. But I don't know.
And that's with that 8?
8.
What did you take the last week?
So
last week?
It's interesting. I didn't take a hit anything over a minus 4, and up to that point it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8. Up until the last 4 match weeks, 5 match weeks, I had taken 8 minus 4s throughout the season. So I feel like it's fairly low. Match week 35, I took a minus 8, and then in 37 and 38, I took minus 8s.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And it.
Will you do that again? You didn't take as many hits. You took a lot. I took a lot.
I feel like I took the perfect amount.
Do you want to take less?
No, I feel like it was at the end of the season. It was a lot more, I think, predictable. Like the last match week. And we'll get to this here in a minute, because we want to talk like analytics and head. I know you had talked about that, Travis. Yeah. What am I seeing on the field? What are my eyes seeing? And then how does that couple with analytics? I think this season I went with both. I went with, okay, what are the numbers telling me, and then also what am I seeing on the pitch? It's just like last week, the last match week, I brought in Romero. I just picked the wrong spur.
Right.
The wrong spur defender. And then I brought in Elise. And this literally is the difference in me winning the mini league.
Yeah.
If I bring in Eze, it was between Elise and Eze. I brought it because I felt
the form guy.
I felt like it was going to be Crystal Palace smash against Aston Villa. I said it on last week's pod. I'm on the record for saying it. And I put my money where my mouth is. I brought in Mateta and I started him. I brought in Elise, and then I brought in Romero with Spurs because I thought for sure they'd get a clean sheet against Sheffield. And anyways, all that being said, it was Palace smash. I just picked the wrong Palace midfielder in Elise and Eze, and that's the difference between me winning the mini league.
Yep.
So, but which is fine. Like, that's going to happen. But in other words, I say all that to say is I went with my eyes. My eyes is like Aston Villa just won the they won Champions League.
Yeah, they nailed down fourth
Champions
place.
League.
Yeah.
Okay. So they had nothing to play for, and they're playing at Palace their last match. So they're not playing in front of their home fans. Crystal Palace, no one's form was better than theirs on the end of the season pretty much, except for Arsenal and City. So and you could argue that neither Arsenal or City would have wanted to play Crystal Palace.
Yeah,
near the end of the season. So it just, I'm just using this as an example of, I think you just got to have a mix of what am I seeing and bring the analytics in. But Brian, you said there's tons of pundits out there that said Aston Villa is like, don't pick Palace players.
Well, there was, I mean, you're going to find whatever narrative you want to find, and I think that was, that I'm glad whenever there are accounts that are honest about like which narrative am I buying this week? Am I buying Crystal Palace is, they have nothing to play for, and Aston Villa is the Champions League team, regardless of whether they've secured fourth place? Am I buying? Which one am I buying? Am I buying? We talked about it last week. Am I buying Salah's actual form, or am I buying that it's Klopp's last game at Anfield? Mm-hmm. Like which of those things? Like, he looks awful. He looks tired. Son would have been the same thing. Which thing am I buying? Sheffield's the worst team in Premier League history, but they're at home. Am I buying that Son is one of the most clinical finishers in world football, or that he's leggy and hasn't really done a whole heck of a lot recently? Like, which of those things? Like, whichever narrative you want to build. There were plenty of people that were out there saying that, and so I think, I think that's why, like, you find whatever opinion you want. You can find whatever you need, whatever you feel like you need to reinforce a decision. Go for it. Like, you'll be able to find someone to say it, and there might even be numbers to back it up. I mean, that happened a ton this season, I think, for me, where I'm like talking myself into moves or talking myself into a player because I'm like, well, no, I mean, how many more times is Darwin going to get? Look how many big chances. I mean, he really does get a lot of big chances. I have to. One of these has got to go in, and then they just don't, and they continue to not.
Yeah.
And at some point, it's like, you can believe your eyes, you can believe the numbers, you can believe a combination of however you want to do it. But yeah, I think it's.
I think you can't just look at numbers and do this game. You can. Are you going to finish near the top? I feel like there's a couple decisions once or twice a week. I mean, technically, most fantasy games, if you just produce numbers and pick the team, you're probably going to be okay.
Cheers.
Yeah.
But I think you got to be able to add the eye component in there,
and that's where I lost the plot. I didn't care about the stats.
But you
looked at that.
You have an FPL overall winner who didn't do that at all. You have
who didn't do what?
Didn't watch a single game.
Oh, okay.
You just looked at the numbers.
Yeah, and now this is why I'm saying, have entire leagues governed strictly by either an AI model, some analytics like computer program, and I think that really is kind of bothering some of the historical managers who have done a combo of both. Fantasy Scout who has been doing this for an extremely long time.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys this season who had, I think, one of his worst ever. And it's a guy who's been completely reliable, who's been extremely good at this, who, sounds a little bit bummed.
Did either
sounds
of you guys
burned
use AI
out
at all for anything?
No.
You don't even know what AI is,
What?
do you?
It stands for artificial intelligence. So
I thought we were talking about Allen Iverson.
Yeah.
Also that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't be surprised if you did.
So you can do it, like we say every time. We use all the stats that we use are from Fantasy Football Fix. You can't. I mean, if you count their
suggestions,
1, 2, 4, 8 week suggestions for like teams, because all of those are based on it's all data projections. So this player is projected to score 55 points in the next 8 games or whatever, compared to this player who's projected to only score 46, and you pick the guy based on that projection. Sure, you can do that. But like, I'm sure there were times early in the season where what's Cole Palmer?
They weren't picking Cole Palmer.
What's Cole Palmer?
No one was picking Mbuemo.
What is Cole Palmer's projections over a certain amount of time?
No one was picking Vissa.
There was no data to support it other than the data that was happening for Cole Palmer.
Right, and he
That's
is,
the
and
crazy
he
part.
and he has a variable like low expected minutes, which that factors into a projection, and so all of those things are going to factor into a number that you're then going to look at and say, well, all right, well, I'm not going to get that guy because look at how his lowest projection is. I'm going to get this other guy's projected way higher, and you end up with like, you would. Analytics FC would have picked Darwin Nunez over Holland most weeks, I think, just by sheer volume and chance creation and chances like put on a platter. And how would that have turned out? Depends on whether Holland was injured or not. Like there are times where that actually would have worked.
Rodri was on the pitch,
right? Or whatever. Like there are times where it was like, yeah, it looks like that's a bad decision, but whatever. Like that's what I'm saying. Like to me. The game, you can't blame it all on luck. It's not all luck. Clearly, it's not. Eventually, the decisions work out for you at some point. But, yeah, there are plenty of times where it's like, there was no way. How many people would have, what were the projections? I would love to go back and see game week 34. What were the projections ahead of game week 34 for Jean-Philippe Mateta? What were his projections? Right. So did all of the people who go there do it because the projections were high or just because like it felt right based on all the numbers, actual performance, real life, plus numbers, plus actual goals, plus flow and vibes? That's it. So what were we talking about?
That's amazing.
Data versus eye test.
Yes, data versus and
for
and
you.
using AI.
You are what? Do you want to incorporate more like data driven?
So
less eye test, more numbers type decisions next season.
Maybe, and the reason why I say that is what's interesting. So for years now, I've completely shifted from this is not an NFL podcast from NFL fantasy sports, where I played NFL fantasy football for years and was pretty good at it. And it's just shifted to completely now Premier League. But the last like 3 or 4 years, I stopped watching NFL games. And I was just looking at stats. And I was helping a friend of mine make midseason changes just based on stats.
Yeah.
And he ended up winning one of the years. He ended up winning a title.
Yeah.
And was making playoffs. And I wasn't watching much.
Yeah.
And I didn't have much invested in it. He was just like the team owner. He's like, hey, you want to help me out? And he's one of our friends.
Yep.
You've done the same thing.
Yeah.
I told him, I was like, I'm retiring from the league. He said, well, just help me, just help me a little bit. And I'm like, okay. So then I realized, anyways, but I just stopped watching games. I still watch some, but not like I used to.
Yeah.
And
you sound like Scott Weeby.
Sounds like a Falcons fan.
Yeah,
too.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. That is.
He didn't mention the refs though. So
it is a hard 28-3 is a hard existence.
Yeah.
Anyways, so yeah, I think I do want to pay more attention. It's too easy to see actual numbers. Like the live FPL net, I'll be looking at that every week. The amount of info that's in there is unreal. Yeah. And I only was just turned on to that at the end of the season here, and that will not be a mistake that was made next year. So, and I also think too, Brian, with all the AI and all the information now that is out there, guys who have been good in the past, it's made it harder for them to make it in the top 10K because there's people out there who don't really care, who are also probably using that same information on DraftKings or fantasy betting sites because there's so much information now out there, especially with AI. Yeah. So you got guys that probably aren't even watching games in the top 10K that are just doing it maybe even for just money reasons. So I get it. I get that there's going to be some discourse there, but you know what? It's still awesome. It's still an awesome product, and I love it, and I'm going to continue to watch and do fantasy or do FPL and hopefully keep this podcast going. So, as long as it's still fun, right?
Yeah, that's the big thing.
Brian, what did you learn quickly, if you can even do that? And then I just want to cover a couple small little housekeeping things, mainly like I want to mention who got relegated, who's coming up. Although we don't know the last team coming up yet, because the most expensive game in football I don't think has been played yet.
This season was again, like I don't know how else to say. My looking back through my low rank, was early days, but it was my lowest rank of the season was 3 million.
Okay.
So my lowest overall rank was 3 million. That was like game week 6 or something like that. My highest rank was my last game week rank. So I never got higher in the game week for my overall rank until game week 38. That was my highest. My ending rank was my highest rank for the season.
That is wild.
And it is wild. And I would say, like, play the tape back. I gave up twice in the second half of the season. I gave up after game week 20 twice.
Wow.
And I like the looking back through those numbers, like game week 20 game week 25 was no, game week 22 was a really bad one. I had just climbed up right at Christmas. I had climbed up to 500,000. So I had clawed back to what I felt like. I'm like, all right, finally. Like I got a good result. By game week 25, I was back to 850,000. And that was where I was like, that's it. That was where I was like, I can't get ahead of this thing no matter what. Then I had 2 good results and I got up to 700,000. And I'm like, all right, can build on that. Little bit of steam. Game week 25, back to 850,000. Like every time I made, like I chipped into it, something like
came
bad
back in
game
your
week.
face.
It sounds like watching your retirement investments as a 40-something-year-old. That's what it really looks.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like.
No, and then game week 29 happened, and the only thing by game week 29, if I had free hit in game week 29, then I really would have been. It really would have been season over, because then at that point I would have only had a bench boost left. I might have made some of the same moves I did in game week 34, but I wouldn't have been nearly as I wouldn't have been able to be as creative with it. I would have had to build in a different way. So holding the free hit, I did have a wild card, but holding the free hit for game week 34 was like, that was like the one thing where I was like, that's an advantage. That's my last advantage. And game weeks 33 to 38, I mean, I'm not even going to try to do the math, but there were 3 of the 6 weeks were 153, 105, and 132. The spikes for so many people at the end of the season were so drastic.
They were big.
And it came down to, in 34, it was Eze, Mateta, Ben White, his huge score in 34. Did you have Saliba or did you have Ben White? Did you have Gabriel only, or did you know what I mean? Like some of those decisions, like did you put Mateta in your team or Isak?
Mm-hmm.
Like there were some of those like 50-50s that anybody could have done or whatever, that if you did it, you shot up massively. And if you didn't, like there were people who free hit in 34 and they did horribly. And I think most people look at that as like the benchmark of their season, because it was like, did you crush game week 34 or not?
I didn't free hit and crushed it.
Right.
I had a 129 in 34 without a free hit. I think that's
which
decent.
is a huge score, right? Because the average, even the top 10,000's average was 100.
Right.
That week.
Yep.
So either way, I'm just saying, like, looking back over the season, like, it really was. I just don't think the advantages are going to be there next year without the doubles, because I think the scores, I mean, I think it'll just require more of you for how you select your team or whatever. But like, yeah, to have
that sounds like exactly what I need
to see as many red arrow weeks from game week 20 on, and then still finish the season the
high.
strongest that I did at any point anywhere else in the season.
Right.
I'm like, I don't even know what to say about it.
You're real Rocky.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, in the end, it came down for our mini league. the final day. This is something I talked about.
By the way, congratulations,
Thank you.
mini league champ. Also, podcast league. You finished, which I'll get to that. That's another part of housekeeping that I wanted to discuss. But podcast league, I had it right here, and of course, this is great.
You finished fourth.
No, I got third.
You got third.
Yeah,
which is that's you've never fished a high in the podcast league.
I don't think so.
So yeah, that's excellent.
Something that was like my last decision. Like so many people had an Elise, like went straight to Michael Elise. So many people were going straight to Kai Havertz, and I think for me, it really was like on Sunday. It was, do I just go with Elise? Do I go with the safety of Havertz? Do I really go wild and go for Leandro Trossard? Or like the numbers, we talked about it on this podcast, the numbers were really close between Eze and Elise. And for me, it really was, it came down entirely to almost everyone has gone Elise. I'm going to swerve to Eze. That's it. And I wanted to take a hit to put Salah in because I was strongly buying the Salah at home on Klopp's last day. By Sunday, I was buying that narrative. And then I was going to sell Isak because of all the rumors about Isak. I was going to sell Isak. I would have had to sell him and bring in Mateta. So it would have been a -4, Garnacho out for Salah, Isak out for Mateta. Play both. Likely, I think, based on what we said, probably would have captained Salah. But then I think the tonsillitis for Bowen and some of the sickness rumors about West Ham, I might still have gone with a Manchester City player, no matter what, which ended up being on Haaland. Either way, I think what I was going to say is just because your favorite pundit and the crowd and everyone else in the world has a guy in their team on their team sheet for, at the deadline means nothing. Like that might work, but there are plenty of examples where like game week 38, how many times did I see someone bring in Saka?
Right.
Who cares if you had Saka in your team? The only people who cared that they had Saka in their team are the people who had Isak in their first bench
spot. Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
So you like the luckiest luck in the last game week of a guy who there was no reason to suspect that he was not going to be
in the team
at all. And you get the bench points for a guy who was rumored to be on the bench all the way up to like 15 minutes before the deadline.
Thanks, Eddie Howe.
Thanks, whoever started the rumor that Isak was benched. There were people who beat that by seeing an actual more reliable leaked lineup.
Wow.
Either way, like the template is gonna be as simple as sorting. You can see who everyone has, like from the first week of the season. And I would just think like, there are plenty of places where you're like, like we said this season, the template was strong to start with. If you and some of the guys who were trendy popular picks at the by the deadline in game week 1, they hit. Like Mbeumo, what really was awesome for however many weeks while
they were getting
that Tony was out until he was gone.
Until they stopped getting penalties.
Right. So there are times where that's going to work. There are times where it isn't going to work. You no matter what, you're always trying to catch. You're trying to get a week or two ahead of some asset that bangs. That's it. And if you can do that numerous times through the course of the season, you're going to do well. You just will, just because you're always going to be 2 steps ahead or a week even ahead of what everybody else is going to end up doing.
Yeah.
So, for me, it was a lot more of like, you know what? I think I'm going to do a lot less caring about what is everyone else doing here.
Yeah.
And
what do the numbers say and what do I see?
Yeah, a little bit.
Go 70% numbers. And
what do the numbers tell me though? I think that's
are
what
you
you're doing.
Did this season? I feel like I'm even more certain about waiting for information because of this season than I've ever been before.
You were very
change?
patient.
Did that change at all for you? Like next year?
No.
I would say that all could go out the window if team value starts to be an actual problem next year.
Right.
But
and again, thanks to FPL.net, you can look and see what your team value is for every week during the season. My goal by Christmas is always to be, by match week 20, is to at least be 103.
Okay.
Because you have, pay attention enough. If you get to 103 by Christmas, the rest of the season kind of takes care of itself. But, I feel like you can, early season, it is tough to make up tenths if you lose them. So paying attention to transfers early in the season, if you have someone that's about to lose a tenth, boy, is it tough to earn that back. So paying attention early, I think, is a big deal. And then, but if you can make it to the benchmark by match week 20, that you're already in between a 103 or 104, you're fine.
Yeah.
After that, my final team value was a 105.5. I think you said 105.8, Brian.
That was what, yeah.
I know in the past I've outvalued you.
Yeah.
But oftentimes,
doesn't really mean anything though.
No, oftentimes I'm not nearly as close to your finishes. This by far was the closest I think I'd been to your finishes. But also, you could also speak to captain points. I missed little on captains this season. My captain's points I scored was, I think, pretty high.
Yeah.
626. So
very high.
In the past, that's been poor. It's been so poor. I think Holland just made that easier. And maybe I've slowly been making better decisions too. But you're right, Brian. I like how you said I'm going to stop paying less attention to what the template is out there and feeling like, everyone, the top 10K has this guy. I've got to have this guy. Look at the stats yourself and make decisions. And most of the time, I feel like it's going to put you in a good place. No,
what
this guy? He just said that, but this is the same guy that said he felt bullied into buying somebody multiple times.
He's talking himself into not listening to being bullied next year.
Bullied.
Right?
Yeah,
Bullied.
You don't want to be bullied.
Bullied.
The Saka points in after Christmas, where there was a I can't remember what week it was. There was a time frame where I did not have him, and he was getting returns regularly, and it was killing me. I did the same thing. It
was match week 23. He had a 9, and then a 15, and then another 15, and then a 10, and then a 7. Those 4 or 5 match weeks, he James Ward-Prowsed. He strung together his best streak, and
I had him through. I took him out. I think in game week. I think I made a permanent transfer to get him out in game week 20 in the game week 29. And then I didn't do anything. I kept him out for a minute. And then I felt like I think I went back to him faster than I was wanting to.
And in 32,
yeah.
32 he had 10.
Yeah, it was one of those I'm not going to do it. I am not going to keep him. And then I ended up by game week 34 he was back in my team again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm just either way, there are certain players where Ollie Watkins, he crushed me this year cuz I didn't have him. I said you can look for the season, not having Watkins at his peak cost me 50 points.
Yeah.
So that's 50 points at lots of people there was why wouldn't you have him? He's obvious. I'm sure I can go back and look. I'm sure I argued for him at various times and still was no, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
I'm going to stick with this other format or whatever. I'm going to stick with this other player. And it just didn't work.
Yeah.
So anyway.
All right. Very cool. Any other bits of housekeeping before I jump into?
None.
Okay. All right. Look, so as this season is ending, we're going to say goodbye to players from Luton Town, Burnley, and Sheffield. And Burnley and Sheffield, I feel like every other year, Scott would call them a yo-yo team, where every other year they get relegated and then promoted. I hate that Luton Town's getting relegated. I loved how they played. I loved how they went after games. They never just parked the bus. They went after it every single time. They played an amazing, fun style of football. They didn't play just survive and just try to get a 0-0 draw. I would dare say, most of their games, even against bigger teams, Liverpool had to have a late goal to draw them. Was it like a 3-3 draw?
Something like
I think,
that.
Travis, at one point. I know Arsenal playing at Luton.
Same.
Was the same.
You guys ended up winning.
We did, but we needed to win at the time or whatever. It felt like it, but it was like a I don't know, a 3-2 or 2-2.
I think it was 3-2.
And it wasn't many games Arsenal gave up more than 2 goals in a game. So
at home they were tough.
I just hate to see Luton Town go. I love their story, and Wrexham. If anyone's paying attention, Wrexham's trying to do what Luton did, pretty much get like 4 promotions in like 5 years, and that's how they got up to the Premier League. So hopefully Luton Town will be back. I really hope so. They play a fun brand of football. Welcoming in, unfortunately, we have to have Leicester back. Leicester win the championship.
In your face, buddy.
In my face.
Yeah.
Leicester and Chelsea are 2 of my least favorite teams. But very cool. I'm pumped to see the Tractor Boys.
Ipswich, yeah.
League Barry, longtime listener,
yeah,
and an active member in Slack with us. League Barry, massive Tractor Boy. Brian, am I doing this right?
Sure.
With Ipswich Town.
Keep going, man.
Ipswich Town getting promoted for sure. And again, my favorite thing the championship does, honestly, English Premier League football does, is the championship playoffs, where. And that hasn't been played yet because there's still 2 more games left to play in the championship as I can see it. No, they play a total of 46 games, right? Is that right? 46 or 48. I can't remember. If only there was a way. There's 24 teams that play 48 games. No, that can't be right. They play 46. So the games have been played, but the playoffs have not happened yet. It's Leeds against Norwich and then Southampton versus West Brom. So we are very familiar with Southampton, Norwich, West Brom, and Leeds obviously was back up. We're going to get one of those teams coming back into the Premier League next year. So it's going to be Leicester, Ipswich Town, and then either Leeds, Southampton, West Brom, or Norwich. And again,
that's exciting.
Yeah.
You like
I
all
hope it's Leeds. I want to see Leeds.
I like all 4 of those names.
I don't want to see West Brom. Don't want to see Norwich. Southampton and Leeds is who I'm rooting for in those situations. So that is fun as well. Brian, I also want to mention this. I should have done this sooner. You won our mini league cup and also the mini league. No one's ever won the double. You are the first person to win the double. This is your mini league. Now, this is the highest you finished in the podcast league at 3. I finished 5. Definitely my highest. But to win the cup and the mini league, you've won the mini league about third. Is this third time? 4th.
It's 4.
You stopped counting. You've De Bruyne,
won,
De Bruyne, and you stopped counting.
Won a long time ago. Won again shortly after that. Went on a little drought, and then I've gone second, first the last 3 years.
Okay,
in the mini league.
Okay, so back to back.
The podcast league.
The podcast league's tough.
The podcast league is extremely tough.
Yeah. Brutal.
I can't say that we're one of the top podcast leagues, but there's always we've had regularly we've had good, some extremely good
players in the podcast league for sure. There's no doubt about it. All right, so I want to give credit to that too. Our podcast league champ, no fleckin' way, League Xander, wins it with 2,508 points.
How many weeks was he in first?
It wasn't till late. It wasn't till like the last 3 or 4 weeks. He was
in the top 5 most of the season though.
I'm looking at no, I can't do that. Anyways,
you're gonna send him a little 3D printed coaster or something.
Listen, I'm not kidding. Now,
one right there.
League Xander, DM our Twitter account. It's the easiest way to do it. DM the Twitter account. And we have something for you. So DM the Twitter account.
It might not be this.
It won't be
FPL
that.
America
Won't be
Podcast.
that.
Brian,
It just
I
says
know.
FPL
I still
America.
can't see you on my screen. Give that to me. I don't even know.
Oh
if
yeah,
your
you're
video's
you're
coming
off.
through.
Why am I off?
You're still off.
Something's
All right,
broken.
I mean,
What's
fine
wrong
by-
with that?
I had
What's
been-
wrong with that
I had
coaster?
Ben Roethlisberger up for a while, just a photo of him.
There's nothing wrong with
Then
that
I
logo
turned-
coaster. That is absolutely fantastic.
took a
Well,
picture
on the
of you.
website, I have never been mad about having Paul Rubens from his insane character on 30 Rock as my avatar on
Gilbert.
there. That is fantastic.
What was his name?
So, anyways, League Mark.
He is a prince
or
of
League
some
Mark.
weird Eastern European country where
Gilroy.
they were like 40 generations
Loved it.
inbred.
League Xander.
It's one of the
DM
funniest.
DM our
Metabolize
Twitter.
the grapes.
DM our Twitter or X account,
Yeah.
and we will have something for you. We might even put together a goodie package, but you earned it.
sure.
Congratulations. You will not get it. You got to DM us because we don't have
A
any way to
signed
get in touch
headshot
with
of
you.
Brian.
That'd be
That would be amazing.
embarrassing.
That would be. But
also funny.
I'll mention the top
Shirtless.
5 because I made the top 5. I'm a shirtless. I made the top 5, so I'm gonna mention it in the top 5 because I'll never be able to do this again. League Xander, no fucking way. Number 1. League Mark, sex, dogs, and rock and roll, as in fabric.
Drugs.
Yeah, sesk. Yeah,
Like Drogba.
drugs.
Like Cesc
drugs,
Fabregas. Drugs like
and-
Drogba and,
and
rock and roll.
Yes, League
Like
Mark.
rock and roll.
But you
Finished
understand, yes,
second.
like the music.
I got it.
But you know the pun, the rest of it, where it comes from.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'm there. Got it. Drugs.
Is he-
AI is short for artificial intelligence.
It's not Allen Iverson.
Interesting.
Our own Brian, League Brian, Scott Thicktomine.
Scott Thicktomine could have changed numerous times.
Number 3, League Shen, Rockabye Angel, number 4, and our own 2 thumbs pointing at this guy, 5th, a side of rice.
Whoever was
Lee
in fourth,
David.
whoever was in third place going into the last week, I feel bad because it was an awful score.
It was, I think it was, and this is a guy who's done well. It's League Max Liver of Grealish.
Yeah, he scored
He
like
turned in a 46.
Yeah, he had a
Ouch.
40 something, and I remember seeing that and thinking like, of all the weeks,
That's rough.
you hate that. You never want to end that way.
Yeah, that's tough.
But
That's
yeah.
tough.
But what huge congratulations again! Like to have a podcast league player score, 2,500 points to finish in the top. Where does that put him? Top.
I looked at top 64,000.
Okay, I mean that's a very good finish.
What's
at
so
this point?
What's so crazy is a former host here, Scott, when his top finish ever was like top 33.
Yeah, what were the points that year?
12.
It wasn't as high as the points were this year. It was a Leicester style of a year
Yeah,
where
really great final rank, but in a season where his score was
Points were hard to
100
come by.
points less than what the scores are now.
no,
And-
190.
Oh, okay.
It was 190. I remember looking that up. It was 190. So,
yeah.
but them's the breaks. You deal. You play with the cards that you're dealt.
Yeah.
So things change. Anyway, so all that being said, I don't think I have anything else. That covers the podcast league, covers relegation, who we're saying goodbye to, who we're saying hello to. I know nothing about Ipswich, so maybe we'll have to get League Barry on in the beginning of in the pre-pod season. Maybe we can connect with him and see if we can tell us about the Tractor Boys. That it might actually be a good
We're
time.
going to need live subtitles. He's Irish. I don't know if we're going to be able to do that.
Oh,
up with.
Barry, I cannot believe he did that. I would not. All right, gentlemen, anything else? Brian, any one last thing?
No, I think this was a weird year. It was a super weird year. It was a great real life Premier League season, but a really weird fantasy season.
Okay.
There's just a lot of strange things. Yeah, I agree. I can't wait for next year. I will probably pay attention through at least week 10 next year.
Okay. I respect that.
And
Yeah.
and that's going to make all the difference.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird to have a target because I feel like most of the years I've played, and we've been doing this for a long time. Most of the years I've played, I've been like, I just want to do whatever. Like, you want to win your mini league or whatever, but there's never been like a, it's not like we might be doing this as pundits, but we're not anywhere near the pundit class of FPL accounts that are out there.
I definitely am not.
But no, like to have
we're getting there.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like to see now 3 seasons in a row where I'm like, oh, that's actually really good.
Yeah,
like 50K, 90K.
Yeah.
But back 3 consecutive seasons. I'm like, all right, well now 50K is a legitimate
it used
actually have that as a real target next year where it's like,
that's right.
Hey, I've done this now 3 times where I was like this close to that number or whatever.
Have you thought about quitting your job and just focusing on this yet?
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. Is you just I just want to. Yeah, I want to get a job. I want to get a job for one of these outlets and write articles.
No, I mean you're kind of turning into the Manchester City of FBL America podcast right now. You got targets on your back, dude.
Only the mini league, not the podcast league.
Well, I mean,
that's true.
It's tough for anyone to be legit constantly in the podcast league.
We'll be bringing some charges against you later.
Yeah, that's the biggest. That's what I'm really nervous about.
Financial fair play. All right.
Yeah.
Well, for the last time this season, concluding the 23-24 FPL America season, for the FPL America podcast, this is David Smith. Until next time.